Hey guys, tonight we're about to embark on a journey smoother than a Victorian silk waistcoat and twice as questionable. The complete, utterly bonkers history of laudanum. Yes, laudanum. The magical medicine of the 1800s that could cure your headache, your heartbreak, your toothache, your existential crisis, and, if you believed the bottle, probably your neighbor's gout, too. And since this is our brand new channel, before you settle in, maybe take a second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what you find here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that gentle white noise, and get comfortable. Bonus points if you have a suspiciously floral quilt and an urge to treat a sore throat with something stronger than tea. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was like to live in a world where literally everything could be cured with a single bottle of liquid courage? Did you ever wish your cough syrup had the kick of a wild horse and the addictive potential of TikTok? Have you ever wanted to visit a pharmacy where the most helpful advice was just keep drinking until you forget the problem existed? Did doctors in the 1800s actually know what was in those bottles? Did Victorian moms really dose their babies with opium before bedtime? Was there ever a time when taking a little laudanum and walking it off was actual medical advice? And would you have survived a single week with the average Victorian medicine cabinet? Or would you be too busy hallucinating on a fainting couch to notice? Congratulations. You've just woken up in London, 1846. The air is thick with coal smoke. Your doctor carries a mustache and absolutely no scruples, and you're about to experience the history of laudanum, from cure-all miracle to deadly national obsession. Breathe deeply. That's probably the laudanum talking. London, 1846. The streets are coated in grime. The air smells like a coal-fired regret, and every second person is coughing into a hanky. Medical science? Not so much science, mostly optimism and a sprinkle of reckless endangerment. If you feel unwell, don't worry, there's a bottle for that. And no one's washing their hands. Let's set the scene. You awaken to the soothing sound of distant horse hooves, the shrill whistle of a pie vendor, and the muffled curse of someone discovering that their shoes have fused to the pavement with industrial-strength mud. You peek out the window, if you're lucky enough to have glass, and see a thick, oily fog rolling through the alleyways, blending with chimney smoke and the vague aroma of boiled cabbage. Congratulations, you've survived the night, and your lungs have survived another dose of London's signature flavor, eau de coal. Your first breath is, frankly, a tactical error. Victorian air quality is less crisp morning breeze and more inhaling the inside of an exhausted fireplace. You can practically chew it. Even your eyelashes are gathering soot. The city's signature look is called gray. Clothes, buildings, your cat, your bread, everything is working hard to blend in with the ever-present layer of London dust. Fashion tip: there's no point wearing white. Even the Queen's petticoats would last approximately 6 minutes before taking on a tasteful charcoal hue. Time for breakfast. Is that porridge or just yesterday's rainwater with ambition? Either way, it's warm, lumpy, and reassuringly bland. If you're feeling unwell, maybe your throat is raw, your head is pounding, or you're pretty sure you've just invented a new kind of cough, don't worry. The answer is simple. Visit the local apothecary and let them hand you a small bottle of something brown, mysterious, and almost definitely more dangerous than your actual illness. That bottle is probably laudanum, but honestly, it could be anything. Medicines are stored in elegant glass jars, lined up neatly behind the counter, their handwritten labels a challenge for even the most ambitious codebreaker. For nervous complaints, for melancholy, or simply for everything. Side effects are never discussed because there are none if you don't write them down. Stepping outside, you join the flow of the city. Omnibuses creak along the cobbles, their wheels splashing through puddles of water that are, at best, 10% actual water. Street vendors shout the day's wares, most of which are bread, questionable eels, or the sort of meat you'd rather not discuss after dark. Dodging between carriages, you realize there's something special about London's energy. It's relentless, a city determined to keep moving, even if no one has seen the sun since last Michaelmas. And everyone is coughing. Coughing is practically the city's anthem. You hear it in the market, in the parlor, during church sermons. People swap cough remedies the way modern folks trade Wi-Fi passwords. Some recommend honey, others say onion poultices, and the boldest of all simply prescribe another, larger dose of laudanum. If you don't like coughing, you might try holding your breath, but the city will win eventually. Of course, no one is washing their hands. Why would they? Germ theory hasn't landed yet. The only things spreading faster than rumors are bacteria, and if you fall ill, people will nod sympathetically and say, "Bad air." No one suspects the 5 layers of filth on every public doorknob. If you survive the week, it's either luck or because you're fortified by whatever is in that medicine bottle you keep beside the bed. As dusk settles, the gas lamps flicker to life, casting a yellow haze over the city and making the fog look almost romantic if you squint and ignore the puddles. You head home, lungs full of character, and reflect on the simple joys. You made it through another day, and the laudanum bottle is still half full. In Victorian London, that's basically a win, because here, comfort is fleeting, but resilience is everywhere. And if you can fall asleep with the sounds of horses, coughing, and the distant thud of another chimney sweep losing his hat, you're tougher than you think. Sleep tight, just don't forget to put the bottle back on the nightstand. You'll probably need it tomorrow. Laudanum arrives on the scene, a rich, reddish-brown liquid in a bottle promising relief from all of life's woes. The active ingredient? Opium and alcohol, shaken and stirred. It's less of a prescription, more of an invitation to see what happens when you combine Victorian anxiety with poppy juice. Let's take a closer look at the world's most questionable wellness trend. The bottle sits on your mantelpiece, nestled between a wilted fern and a fading daguerreotype of someone's great uncle. The label is elegant, possibly hand-drawn by someone who's never met a medical journal, and promises to treat headaches, heartbreaks, sore throats, lumbago, general malaise, digestive complaints, insomnia, and a suspiciously long list of other ailments that suggest the inventor was mostly guessing. In a city where the weather is mostly drizzle and disappointment, laudanum is a miracle in a bottle. If your definition of miracle is may cause you to forget the plot of your own life for several hours. You uncork the bottle. The smell is sharp, sweet, earthy, and undercut by the warning tang of alcohol so potent it could be used as lamp fuel. The first sip is, well, it's something. It burns a little, but that's how you know it's working. You wait, and soon the rough edges of existence start to blur. Your aches fade, your worries about rent, the neighbor's geese, and your own questionable haircut seem less urgent. Everything is a little softer. Life, for a fleeting moment, is manageable. Doctors love this stuff. Take 10 drops in a glass of water, they say, as if they aren't just handing out liquid chaos in a decorative bottle. But in Victorian England, when doctors say 10 drops, what they really mean is however much you feel like. Maybe it's a teaspoon, maybe it's half the bottle. Medical measurements are more of a suggestion than a rule. The only certainty is that if you take enough laudanum, eventually you'll stop caring about the measurement. You are not alone in your devotion. Everyone is using it. Aristocrats, artists, day laborers, grandmothers with sore knees and mothers with sore nerves. There's a bottle in every kitchen cupboard, every apothecary's shop, every respectable handbag. You start to wonder if the entire city is running on a gentle, collective buzz. Even the local priest seems a little too relaxed during Sunday sermons, and the vicar's wife hasn't complained about the choir in weeks. Laudanum's biggest fans are the poets and writers. If you find yourself at a dinner party with anyone who owns more than 3 quill pens, prepare for endless talk of creative inspiration and opening the doors of perception. They'll tell you laudanum is the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. Or, if you listen long enough, they might just recite some truly terrible poetry about clouds. Either way, the evening blurs pleasantly, and nobody remembers who paid the bill. Of course, there are side effects. You might find yourself napping through important social occasions, losing track of conversations, or experiencing the kind of vivid dreams that make you wake up and check if your furniture has turned into talking cats. Constipation becomes a way of life. No one talks about it, but you and everyone you know have developed a new shuffling walk and an appreciation for prunes that borders on obsession. Eventually, laudanum becomes less of a treat and more of a necessity. The days seem a little sharper without it, the air a little more unforgiving. You promise yourself you'll only use it for real emergencies, like headaches, existential dread, or Monday mornings. But the truth is, once you've let laudanum into your life, it's hard to imagine facing a Victorian Tuesday without it. So, you refill your bottle. After all, it's the world's best invention, a cure for everything. And, if you're not careful, the start of a whole new set of problems. But for now, the world is warm. The pain is distant, and your worries have floated away on a cloud of sweet, opium-scented bliss. And really, isn't that what every Victorian secretly wanted? Step into a Victorian pharmacy, bottles everywhere, labels handwritten by someone whose handwriting is equal parts flourish and cryptic warning. Laudanum sits on the shelf next to tonics for female hysteria, general malaise, and excessive thinking. Your pharmacist is a mix between a chemist and an enabler. You stand in the doorway, greeted by the overwhelming aroma of dried herbs, cloves, and just the faintest trace of medicinal regret. Wooden shelves creak under the weight of glass jars, each one containing something slightly more dubious than the last. The lighting is dim, and the dust is, frankly, historical. Every cobweb a silent witness to at least 3 generations of questionable health advice. The pharmacist, sporting a spectacular set of mutton chops and an apron streaked with unidentifiable stains, peers at you over tiny spectacles. His expression says, "I may know the secrets of life," but his hair says, "I have definitely spilled ammonia on myself this week." He asks how he can help, but he already knows. The answer, most days, is something for the nerves, or the joints, or the soul. He reaches for a bottle, hand steady, handwriting unsteady. You watch as he carefully inscribes the label, "For general use." The instructions? Take as needed, or until the neighbors stop annoying you. He tucks a little pamphlet into your hand, which is mostly an advertisement for more things you definitely do not need. Tired? Try Dr. Fenimore's Rejuvenating Nerve Tonic. Ingredients: a trade secret and enough sugar to unnerve a dentist. Let's be honest, you have no idea what's in half of these bottles. Tinctures, elixirs, and balms for every complaint. Most are some blend of alcohol, opium, camphor, a hint of peppermint oil, and whatever was left over in the cauldron at closing time. If you ask the pharmacist what's in it, he'll smile vaguely and launch into a monologue about ancient remedies. Galen's theory of the humors and the healing power of spirits, the kind you drink, not the kind that haunt your attic. On the shelf, laudanum sits in pride of place, its glass reflecting the amber light. Next to it, cough syrup, sleep drafts, syrup of poppies, cordials for delicate ladies, and a little jar of something labeled anti-gloom drops. If you ask about side effects, the pharmacist waves a dismissive hand. A touch of drowsiness, perhaps. Maybe mild hallucinations. But isn't it better than being sad? This is medical reassurance, Victorian style. Payment happens in pennies and pleasantries. The pharmacist tells you that business is good, lots of nerves, lots of worries, and a steady flow of customers convinced their spleen is about to pack up and leave for the continent. Occasionally, someone bursts in demanding a cure for excessive daydreaming or a solution to nervous reading. He never disappoints. There's a bottle for everything, even sudden melancholy in Gentlemen of Leisure. For a moment, you marvel at the sheer optimism of it all. Victorian apothecaries have an answer for every problem, provided that problem can be drowned in something brown and sticky. No one leaves empty-handed. If you don't know what's wrong with you, the pharmacist will invent a condition and match it with a potion. Feeling listless? That's probably a surfeit of phlogiston. Or ghosts. Here's a powder, just sprinkle it on your toast. Outside, you cradle your little paper parcel like it contains gold. Which, in a way, it does, at least until the first wave of dizziness and the sudden urge to write poetry about rain clouds. Apothecaries are the quiet heart of the city's hope, commerce, and denial. Their mixtures won't fix the air, the streets, or your existential dread, but they will, at least, make you forget to care for a while. So you tuck the bottle into your coat and step back into the London fog, trusting your local apothecary to provide exactly what you didn't know you needed. If nothing else, you have a story and a suspiciously heavy paper bag. Welcome to the mysterious miracle market. Sleep tight and don't read the fine print. The family doctor arrives, carrying a black bag and exactly 0 useful advice. His treatment plan? Prescribe laudanum for anything short of decapitation. Headache? Laudanum. Sadness? Laudanum. Accidentally saw your own reflection and got scared? Have some laudanum. Let's set the scene. You're curled up in the parlor, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of mothballs and generations of disappointment when there's a knock at the door. The doctor enters, looking respectable, if slightly out of breath from climbing 3 steps. His spectacles glint in the low light, and his mustache twitches with the self-assurance of a man who once read half a medical journal and has been coasting on it ever since. He sets his bag down with a thunk that promises answers. What's inside? Bottles. Bottles and more bottles, each one filled with hope, dread, or whatever was left over at the apothecary last Tuesday. There are no stethoscopes or thermometers, but you might spot a pocket watch and a mysterious velvet pouch labeled emergencies. If you peek, it's just more laudanum. Emergencies come in many forms: fevers, heartbreak, and the sudden realization you've run out of laudanum. The doctor sits beside you with an air of practiced sympathy. He asks about your symptoms, but never waits for the end of your sentence. Sore throat? Say no more. He's already shaking out a generous dose. Night sweats? Classic. His prescription pad is eager, and the solution is always the same. To him, laudanum is the hammer, and every patient is a suspiciously opium-shaped nail. Modern readers might expect at least a few probing questions, or, say, an actual examination. Instead, you get a story about how his uncle once cured a persistent cough with nothing but a brisk walk and half a bottle of the good stuff. Medical history in Victorian England is, frankly, 1 part home remedies, 2 parts wishful thinking, and whatever is left in the bottom of the nearest glass. If you're very unlucky, the doctor might take your pulse. He holds your wrist like he's searching for a secret handshake, then nods, eyes narrowed. You're a bit damp, he concludes, scribbling RX. Laudanum in handwriting so jagged it could double as a cryptic crossword puzzle. You could have the plague, or just a bad attitude. Either way, you'll be dozing off within the hour. He doesn't leave right away. There's etiquette to be observed. A few questions about the weather, a passing mention of the neighbor's gout, and a lengthy reassurance that laudanum is perfectly safe. Take as much as you feel is right, he says, as if you're not about to operate a coal stove on 2 hours of sleep and a head full of opium dreams. Children? Absolutely. Give them a smaller spoonful for the nerves. Granny's got joint pain? Don't worry, laudanum. Father's lost his job at the textile mill and can't sleep? A little more laudanum, maybe with a dash of whiskey if it's payday. The good doctor's answer to every crisis is to prescribe and prescribe until you wonder if his own bloodstream is just 30% opiate by volume. Eventually, he stands, tips his hat, and reminds you to send for him if things take a turn. You're left with a bottle, a vague sense of relief, and the unshakable feeling that Victorian medicine is just a particularly stylish form of denial. You're not sure if you feel better, but you do feel sleepier, which is as close as anyone comes to health in a world where everything is solved by a tincture. As the doctor disappears down the street, you realize, in this time, doctors are less healers and more enthusiastic middlemen between your body and the nearest poppy field. Next time you stub your toe, you know exactly what's coming, because when the only tool you have is laudanum, every problem starts to look delightfully blurry. Sleep well and remember to hide the bottle from the children, at least until after dinner. Laudanum isn't just for the desperate. The upper crust swears by it. If you're a lady of leisure, with too many feelings and not enough hobbies, laudanum is the answer. Afternoon tea, fainting couch, and a discreet nip of the good stuff, the holy trinity of Victorian self-care. Welcome to the parlors of the posh, where the curtains are thicker than the family secrets and everything that isn't dusted twice a day gets replaced by a servant. Here, the problems are less, will I eat today? And more, should the table flowers be heliotrope or lilac? You exist in a world of delicate appetites and delicate nerves, where feeling anything with too much enthusiasm is considered a medical event, and being bored is a legitimate crisis. Your daily routine is exquisitely regimented. Breakfast is toast and disapproval. The rest of the morning is spent reading letters, so many letters, on the subject of absolutely nothing. By noon, you're already exhausted, having been emotionally bruised by the sight of a slightly overripe pear in the fruit bowl. Fortunately, your laudanum bottle is always near at hand, nestled among perfume bottles and the secret stash of imported chocolates you pretend you don't know about. At tea time, the ritual unfolds. The butler glides in, chin held high, bearing a silver tray. On it, tea, biscuits, and a tiny cut-glass bottle, elegantly labeled for repose. The conversation turns, as it always does, to who is visiting Bath this season, who is tragically unwell, and whether the neighbor's new horse is really as fast as they say. No one mentions the laudanum, but everyone is thinking about it. A teaspoon swirled into your chamomile, a discreet drop on your tongue, and suddenly the world is a much softer place. Your mother-in-law's stories fade to background noise, and the sight of Aunt Agatha's hat, bristling with taxidermied birds, is less of an existential threat. The men aren't immune either. If you're a gentleman with business anxieties, meaning you once tried to read the account books, laudanum is just as much your ally. A quick stop at the club, a brandy and laudanum cocktail, and you're ready to face another round of not actually doing anything. Some gentlemen even claim a tot before a spirited game of whist, ensuring their losses sting less and their conversation flows with extra florid nonsense. The ultimate accessory for high society? A fainting couch. Every drawing room is equipped with one, lest someone's constitution be overcome by poetry, politics, or the weather forecast. You recline, hand to brow, and sigh dramatically. No one suspects that the true cause of your languor is a mixture of boredom and the slow, creeping effects of your third dose of the day. If you do swoon, don't worry. The maid will revive you with smelling salts and possibly a fourth dose. Recovery is swift. It always is when opiates are involved. Your peers treat laudanum as a mark of refinement, proof that your problems are so nuanced and spiritual that only the finest chemical solution will do. It's whispered that Queen Victoria herself kept a bottle close at hand, which means everyone else must too, just in case. You wouldn't want to be caught managing your emotions with, say, fresh air or a stern letter to the editor. Of course, sometimes the effects are a bit much. An afternoon of overindulgence, and you may find yourself writing poetry to a houseplant or giggling uncontrollably at the embroidery. The staff pretends not to notice. High society runs on secrets, and everyone agrees it's better to have a slightly tipsy mistress than one who decides to take up watercolors or, heaven forbid, politics. As the evening draws in, you retire to your boudoir, laudanum bottle tucked in the bedside drawer, just in case the burden of privilege becomes too much to bear overnight. Sleep comes quickly, soft and tinged with dreams of brighter days, or at least less complicated hats. And that, dear listener, is how the 1% kept calm and carried on, with tea, decorum, and just enough laudanum to make life taste a little sweeter, or, at the very least, a little blurrier. Stubbed your toe? Laudanum. Got a cold? Laudanum. The milkman looked at you funny? That's a 2-dropper day. Victorian daily life is hard. Laudanum is harder. It's the original multi-tool. Except, horrifyingly addictive. Let's walk through a typical day, Victorian style. You rise with the sun, or at least you would, if your neighbor's rooster hadn't lost track of time and started his performance at 4 in the morning. Your mattress is a lumpy collection of wool and apologies. Your joints crack like a startled horse, and you already feel a mysterious ache in a place you didn't know existed. No need to panic. You reach for your trusty bottle. 1 dose, and suddenly the rooster is less of an enemy and more of a misunderstood percussionist. Breakfast is a casual affair. Porridge, bread that could double as a building material, and weak tea. You barely have time to chew before someone in the family starts sneezing, loudly. Is it a cold? Is it the start of the next great plague? Is it just the effect of living in a city where the word sanitation is mostly theoretical? Doesn't matter. There's a cure, and it's spelled Laudanum. Mother adds a drop to her tea. The children get a taste for their nerves, and even the family dog eyes the bottle like he's hoping to forget last night's thunderstorm. As you set out into the world, you face the unending parade of annoyances that is Victorian existence. Stepped in horse manure on the way to market? There's a tincture for the smell, but the real solution is a quick swig of laudanum to take the edge off your embarrassment. Accidentally made eye contact with your landlord? Take 2 drops and practice your most convincing, "I'm definitely not behind on rent" face. The neighbor's child pelts you with a turnip? Laudanum won't make the welt go away, but it will make you care less about it. Work is its own adventure. If you're a seamstress, your fingers are pricked and your back aches by noon. If you're a clerk, your eyes cross from staring at endless ledgers. If you're in any profession that requires standing, walking, lifting, thinking, or breathing, you've got an ailment, and there's a ready solution in your coat pocket. The bottle sits in your drawer, a little amber beacon of comfort, promising not to fix your problems, but to make them seem delightfully fuzzy around the edges. The postman brings a letter, bad news from a distant cousin or a bill from the coal man. No need to read the fine print when you can just medicate your curiosity away. Social gatherings are easier too. Dreading a dinner with the in-laws? Mix a drop into your soup. Is your best friend droning on about the price of potatoes? A quick taste, and you're floating above the conversation, serenely uninterested in root vegetables. Children are not immune to the daily struggles either. Teething, laudanum, tantrum, laudanum, boredom on a rainy afternoon. You guessed it, laudanum. Victorian parenting, in a nutshell, is just a balancing act between keeping the peace and keeping everyone mildly sedated. By the evening, as the coal smoke settles over the rooftops and the gas lights flicker to life, you're exhausted in that uniquely Victorian way. Mentally, physically, spiritually, and possibly existentially. The world outside your window may be relentless, but at least you know there's always a liquid solution for whatever ails you. You sit in your armchair, laudanum bottle in hand, watching the shadows stretch across the floor, knowing tomorrow's troubles are only ever a drop away from manageable. The punchline, of course, is that laudanum doesn't actually solve anything. It just blurs the lines between what matters and what doesn't, until you can't remember what the problem was in the first place. But in a world this chaotic, maybe that's the closest thing to comfort you'll get. Sleep easy, you've earned it, even if your coping mechanism is a little bit suspect. Why stop at adults, Victorian parents, in a move that now seems borderline villainous, routinely dose their children with laudanum for teething, crying, or inconvenient bursts of energy? Because nothing says good parenting like medicinal sedation. Let's set the scene. It's early evening, and the parlor is a war zone. Toys, wooden blocks, rag dolls, and the occasional mysterious puddle are scattered across the rug. Children race around the furniture in a sugar-fueled tornado, which is impressive considering sugar costs more than most people's dignity. The baby is screaming, the toddler is climbing the curtains, and your nerves are unraveling like a Victorian bodice at a summer wedding. But you're not worried. You reach, as generations of parents did, for your trusty friend, the laudanum bottle. Tiny glass spoon in hand, you measure out just a drop, or, let's be honest, however much the child can swallow before wriggling away. The label says, "For all complaints of infancy." That's not an exaggeration. The solution for teething? Laudanum. Colic? Laudanum. Refusing to nap, having too much fun, looking at you with suspicious intelligence? Laudanum. 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 Victorian pharmacies were in on the game. Step into any apothecary and you'll see rows of syrupy, soothing cordials and infant pacifiers, every one of them basically liquid opium, cleverly disguised with honey or a splash of peppermint. They're advertised as safe for children and recommended by leading physicians, which, in the 1800s, means Dr. Hargreaves down the lane who thinks bloodletting is still cutting edge. The bedtime routine is simple. Clean the child's face, optional, brush their hair if you're feeling energetic, and administer a healthy dose of 19th century chemical tranquility. Within minutes, your little darlings drift off to sleep, faces angelic, finally silent. No more crying, no more running. Just peace and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock. It's so effective, you start to wonder if you should try it on the neighbor's dog. Or yourself. Of course, there are unintended consequences. The children sleep deeply, sometimes suspiciously so. They wake up groggy, confused, or ready to eat an entire loaf of bread and still not remember their own name. The term childproof doesn't exist yet, so you keep the laudanum bottle on the mantle, the kitchen shelf, the nightstand, wherever you're likely to need it in a hurry. Victorian parenting, after all, is about fast solutions. If the kids get sick, the prescription is the same. Coughing, laudanum, fever, laudanum, broken arm, wrap it in a rag, and yes, more laudanum. It's not that parents are monsters, well, not all of them. It's that the era's medicine cabinet contains only three things: alcohol, opium, and disappointment. The alternative is doing nothing, which seems crueler still, especially at 3 a.m. when everyone is losing the will to live. The irony is that children, in spite of the dosing, somehow survive. They grow up to be strong, sturdy adults, possibly because their immune systems have trained by surviving infancy in a cloud of opium vapor. School teachers note the dreamy look in every pupil's eyes. The most common reason for failing arithmetic is slight medicinal drowsiness. And if your child happens to be especially lively, well, there's always a little more where that came from. By modern standards, it all seems like madness. But in Victorian England, with no antibiotics, few answers, and even fewer moments of peace, a quiet night was worth its weight in gold. And nothing brought more quiet than a well-timed spoonful of laudanum. So as the lamps dim and the city settles, the house finally falls silent. Outside, the world is chaos, but inside, every child is sleeping soundly. You sit back, grateful for a brief, opiate-sponsored reprieve, and wonder if just a drop will ever be enough. Sleep tight, little Victorians. And parents, maybe hide the bottle before Grandma comes over. She has opinions. Meet the poets, painters, and philosophers of the 1800s, all in various states of existential crisis and mild opioid intoxication. Laudanum wasn't just a medicine, it was a muse. Bonus points if you wrote a book, painted a masterpiece, or just forgot where you put your trousers. Step into the candlelit garret, where the air is heavy with pipe smoke, ink, and the faint, not-so-subliminal scent of desperation. The furniture is mostly made of old crates, stacked books, and a chair that doubles as a hat rack. On the desk, scattered quills, crumpled sonnets, an unfinished sketch of a melancholic owl, and of course the bottle, laudanum, pride of place, uncorked, half empty, and just waiting for the next flash of inspiration or the next bout of self-pity. If you're an artist in Victorian England, suffering is practically on the syllabus. You're expected to be tormented by the futility of existence, plagued by impossible dreams, and, ideally, consumptive in a glamorous, tragic sort of way. The dress code? Floppy shirts, mysterious stains, and hair that can only be described as accidentally romantic. You must appear to have just returned from a midnight stroll along the foggy Thames, even if you've barely left your bed since Tuesday. Your friends are a similar breed. There's the poet who claims to subsist entirely on metaphors and honeyed tea, the painter who keeps forgetting to paint faces, and the philosopher who is working on a treatise called On the Possibility of Never Getting Out of Bed. What do you all have in common? Laudanum, a taste for melancholy, and a passionate distaste for paying rent. Creativity, you insist, is a fragile gift, easily overwhelmed by the harshness of daily life, landlords, unrequited love, the price of coal. Enter laudanum, not just a medicine, but the ultimate accessory for anyone who wishes to feel deeply while ignoring practical concerns. Just a few drops, and suddenly the world is awash in inspiration. The shadows grow longer, the clock ticks more poetically, and you can almost hear the secrets of the universe. Though it might just be the neighbor arguing with his dog again. Ideas flow freely, verses pile up, lines that are beautiful or at least beautifully illegible. You resolve to immortalize the agony of the human soul in iambic pentameter, or perhaps on a canvas as swirls of moody blue and stormy gray. Your latest epiphany, scrawled in the margin of a laundry bill, seems profound until you reread it and realize it's mostly a list of foods that rhyme with turnip. Of course, laudanum is an unpredictable muse. One minute you're on the verge of a creative breakthrough. The next, you're staring at the wall, convinced your reflection is judging you. Sleep comes in fits and starts, and when it does, it's filled with elaborate dreams. Ancient forests, distant planets, endless staircases, and the sudden terror that you've missed a meeting that hasn't been invented yet. There are risks. Inspiration sometimes gives way to inertia. Masterpieces are abandoned for existential brooding, and the only thing multiplying faster than unfinished drafts is the empty bottles under your desk. Your letters to friends are equal parts brilliant and incoherent, peppered with lines like, "I have unlocked the mystery of the moon, but I cannot find my left shoe." Still, the legend grows. To be an artist in this age is to be misunderstood, unappreciated, and, preferably, just a little bit tragic. When the critics finally recognize your genius, they won't. You hope someone will find the scattered poems, the paint-splattered trousers, and maybe, just maybe, the last drop of laudanum. And if not, well, at least you'll be remembered as someone who lived passionately, created beautifully, and never let reality get in the way of a perfectly good daydream. Sleep tight, creative soul. The world can wait. Here's the thing about laudanum. It fixes everything until it ruins everything. Constipation, confusion, and wild hallucinations aren't just side effects. They're Tuesday. If you're not sleeping, you're seeing things. If you are sleeping, you're probably drooling. Let's get honest for a moment. In a world where every problem can be solved with a teaspoon of poppy juice, it's easy to forget that even miracles come with strings attached. You start with an innocent ache, or a nagging cough. A little laudanum here, a little there. Suddenly, your week is measured not in days, but in doses, and your body is politely but firmly requesting a word with you about your new lifestyle choices. First up, digestion. Laudanum is a champion at stopping things. Pain, nerves, bowel movements. That's right. Constipation isn't a side effect. It's a way of life. Every Victorian with a laudanum habit develops a relationship with prunes that borders on the spiritual. Breakfast is less about nourishment and more about strategy. You find yourself bargaining with your insides like you're negotiating a peace treaty. Please, just once this week, I'll never complain about oatmeal again. Then there's the confusion. At first, it's subtle. You misplace a hat, forget the neighbor's name, spend half an hour staring at a shoe convinced it's judging you. But before long, you're double booking tea with the vicar and the chimney sweep and writing a heartfelt letter to your own umbrella. Victorian society is polite enough not to mention it. Everyone's a little muddled these days. But when you find yourself pouring tea into your soup, it might be time to reconsider your dosage. And the dreams. Laudanum unlocks the kind of vivid, technicolor dreams that leave you questioning the fabric of reality. You wake up convinced you've solved mathematics, invented a new color, or been knighted by a cabbage. If you're lucky, you just drool on your pillow and wake up refreshed. If you're not, you spend breakfast explaining to your bewildered family why you spent the night chasing talking ferrets through a field of floating clocks. Of course, some nights you don't sleep at all. Instead, you lie awake watching the wallpaper swirl and thinking profound thoughts like, what if socks had opinions? Shadows shift in the corners, and the family cat seems to be growing extra legs. You start to wonder if you've accidentally overdosed, or if this is just what happens when you combine existential dread with 19th century pharmacology. Physical side effects aside, there's also the slow, creeping dependency. You tell yourself you can stop anytime, maybe tomorrow or next week, but every little ache, every twinge of discomfort is met with the same solution. Laudanum makes you feel better, right up until it makes you feel nothing at all. There's a reason the Victorians never invented rehab clinics. They'd have had to line them up next to the bakeries. If you ask your doctor about these effects, he'll wave his hand and call them minor inconveniences. Constipation builds character, he insists. Hallucinations? Just a sign of a vivid imagination. In a world where people still trust leeches and bleeding, the bar for acceptable side effects is frankly subterranean. And so you carry on, navigating daily life in a pleasant, opiate-scented haze. You forget little things like your shopping list and sometimes your address. Your friends start finishing your sentences and your family learns to hide the prune compote. But who's to judge? After all, the pain is gone, the worries are muted, and the only price you pay is the occasional philosophical conversation with your own reflection. By the end of the day, you've survived another round of Victorian medicine's finest miracle. You climb into bed, unsure if you'll dream of flying elephants, or sleep so deeply the house could burn down around you. Either way, you're not worrying about tomorrow. Not when the side effects are just part of the package. Sleep well, intrepid time traveler. May your dreams be gentle and your digestive tract, against all odds, merciful. Ever wonder how much laudanum is too much? Victorians didn't. Wholesale bottles line apothecary shelves, ready for anyone with a spare shilling and a mild sense of doom. The label says dose, as needed. Good luck with that. Step into your local Victorian apothecary and prepare to be overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of remedies on offer. There's laudanum in every size, shape, and style. Dainty vials for the subtle user, sturdy flasks for the seasoned connoisseur, and, for the most ambitious, family-sized flagons that look like they belong in a ship's cargo hold. It's less of a medicine cabinet, more of a poppy-fueled warehouse sale. Bulk buying is not just for flour and firewood anymore. In Victorian England, laudanum is the household staple, ranking somewhere between bread and existential dread. The pharmacist doesn't blink as you request another bottle. He merely slides a gallon jug across the counter and offers a reassuring nod. There are no awkward questions, no judgment, just the quiet understanding that whatever's happening in your life, it will probably require a pint or two of the good stuff. The logic is simple. Why risk running out when tomorrow's problems are lurking around every cobblestoned corner? You stock up like you're preparing for a siege, but instead of salted pork and dried beans, you've got enough liquid opium to flatten a herd of oxen. For the cautious, there's always the household economy size, a bottle with a handle and a pouring spout, helpfully labeled with optimistic instructions like "take sparingly." You suspect sparingly is open to interpretation. You lug your purchase home and add it to the growing collection in your cupboard. One for headaches, one for coughs, another just in case. Your neighbors are doing the same. If you peek through their window, for science, you'll see a similar lineup, plus a few experimental tonics and the ever-present syrup of poppies, just in case the laudanum bottle runs dry during a cold snap or a visit from the in-laws. At family gatherings, laudanum flows freely. Aunt Edith keeps a flask in her knitting basket for sudden attacks of melancholy, and Uncle Horace tops off his tea with a generous splash, insisting it settles the nerves. Even the household pets are not above a medicinal drop should they develop a suspicious limp or an unfortunate habit of barking at the wallpaper. The only thing more common than laudanum at the dinner table is passive-aggressive conversation about who's inherited grandmother's candlesticks. Bulk buying brings a certain comfort. With bottles stashed in every room, you know you're prepared for anything, except, perhaps, moderation. The labels all read dose, as needed, but there's no fine print, no dire warnings, just the assumption that you'll know when enough is enough. Spoiler, you don't. No one does. Victorian restraint is largely theoretical, especially when the as-needed dose is decided by a mother of 4 after her 3rd toddler tantrum of the afternoon. Of course, there are social downsides. Visiting friends becomes a round of spot the most extravagant bottle. Gossips tally each household's consumption like it's a competitive sport. Rumor has it that the Smiths down the lane have a laudanum barrel, complete with a pump. You wonder if they get a discount for bulk orders, or if the delivery boy needs a wheelbarrow. Eventually, the line between responsible preparation and outright indulgence grows thin. The doctor, when he calls, offers his professional opinion. It's best to keep some on hand. You never know when you'll need it. Conveniently, he also sells the bottles. The apothecary grins behind his counter, counting coins and dispensing comfort by the gallon. By nightfall, the city hums with the quiet contentment of a population thoroughly equipped to ignore its problems in style. You climb into bed, shelves well stocked and nerves well numbed, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brings, cold, heartbreak, or existential horror, you've got a solution bottled up and ready. Sleep well. You are, by Victorian standards, prepared for anything. It's not just laudanum, it's laudanum plus branding. Step right up for Professor Ogilvy's universal elixir, guaranteed to cure everything except common sense. If it doesn't work, simply double the dose or blame your constitution. Let's wander down the bustling streets of Victorian London, where the air is thick with horse manure, coal smoke, and a dazzling array of health promises. The sidewalks are lined with posters for miracle remedies, each one more outrageous than the last. On every corner, a huckster in a top hat waves a bottle above his head, shouting, "Good health for a penny, hair restoration, eternal youth, no questions asked." You try to avoid eye contact, but curiosity, and possibly a nagging headache, draws you in. You arrive just in time for a demonstration. Professor Ogilvy, who may or may not be a professor, stands before a captivated crowd, flanked by an assistant who coughs on cue. He uncorks a bottle and swears that his universal elixir, now with extra poppy essence, will heal your cough, clear your mind, and possibly help you win at chess. If you're skeptical, don't worry. The bottle is covered in metals, all suspiciously shiny, and all allegedly awarded by organizations that no one's ever heard of. He pours a dose for his assistant, who takes it with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who spent years drinking questionable liquids. Moments later, the assistant leaps up, declares himself cured, and offers to carry someone's groceries for free. The crowd erupts in applause. It's less a medical endorsement, more a traveling circus. Victorians are spoiled for choice when it comes to patent medicines. There's Dr. Green's Great Invigorator, Madame Pomfrey's Lady Tonic, and Dr. Brewster's Soothing Syrup for infants and horses. Most of them are laudanum-based, because if there's one thing the era loves, it's a good tincture. But it's not just the opium. Every bottle is a testament to the wonders of marketing. Gilded labels, illustrated pamphlets, and catchy jingles plaster the city. You haven't truly lived until you've heard a barbershop quartet sing the virtues of Dr. Tittleman's nerve wine in 4-part harmony. The instructions are a work of art. Take as required, or more, if feeling adventurous. Guaranteed to restore vim, vigor, and other things beginning with V. If you're unsatisfied, you're encouraged to write a polite letter, wait 6 weeks for a reply, and then realize the address on the bottle leads to a tavern with no forwarding service. Side effects are never listed. The only warning is a cheery, "Keep out of reach of children," unless they're fussy. If the potion doesn't work, it's never the fault of the elixir. You're told it's your constitution, a Victorian catch-all for everything from hereditary gloom to being left-handed. The solution? Take more. Double the dose, and if that fails, seek out Professor Ogilvy's special number 2 elixir, which contains the exact same ingredients, plus a dash of mint. You bring your bottle home and add it to the growing collection on your mantle. The family is divided. Some swear by Madame Pomfrey's, others insist on Dr. Brewster's. It becomes a nightly ritual, a contest to see whose patent medicine induces the fewest side effects or the most colorful dreams. After a few weeks, your symptoms remain, but you now own more glass bottles than the local tavern. If you're lucky, the only real harm done is to your wallet and your dignity. If you're less lucky, you start collecting rare Victorian-era diagnoses, neurasthenia, melancholic vapors, and overactive imagination. But in a world where science hasn't caught up to salesmanship, a bottle with a fancy label is sometimes all the comfort you get. So, bottoms up. As the professor always says, if it doesn't cure you, it'll at least make you interesting at parties. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be as wild as the claims on the bottle by your bedside. Not all laudanum consumption is respectable. In the shadowy corners of the city, opium dens offer another way to escape reality. Here, the air is thick with smoke, and the hopes of people who just wanted a good night's sleep and accidentally invented a new type of problem. Imagine it's a moonless evening in Victorian London. You duck down an alley, guided by the faint glow of paper lanterns and the unmistakable perfume of cheap incense mingled with old socks. Your feet crunch on cobblestones that have seen better centuries, and every now and then a rat scurries past, pausing to judge your life choices. You press on, lured by rumors of velvet cushions, low lighting, and the promise that maybe, just maybe, tonight, you'll finally get 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep, or at least see some very interesting wallpaper. You arrive at the den. The door creaks open, and you're welcomed by a host whose age could be anywhere between 30 and mummified. He beckons you in, not with words, but with the universal gesture for keep your voice down. The regulars are napping. The inside is a world away from the bluster of the street, all plush divans, faded tapestries, and the soft clink of pipes on porcelain trays. The lighting is so low you can barely make out your own hands, which is probably for the best. Cleanliness is a suggestion here, not a rule. You find your seat between a woman in a feathered bonnet, quietly reciting poetry to a houseplant, and a man who may be a minor baron, or may just be wearing someone else's jacket. The attendant, moving with a serene disregard for time, hands you a long, slender pipe and a small ball of sticky, tar-like opium. You fumble for a polite way to ask, how much is too much, but decide to just copy your neighbors and hope for the best. The first puff is heady, sweet, earthy, and just a little bit tragic. Your head feels light, your arms float away from your body, and your problems, rent, heartbreak, that embarrassing incident with the goose, drift into the smoky distance. Around you, the den is alive with quiet muttering, gentle snores, and the occasional giggle from someone who has just discovered the deeper meaning of a gas lamp. Time works differently here. Minutes become hours, or maybe it's the other way around. Someone next to you insists he's seen the future. Another person is convinced she's a cat. You briefly ponder the possibility that you too are a cat, but quickly lose interest when an attendant offers you tea, which tastes faintly of licorice and poor decisions. The opium den is a strange sort of democracy. It's where the wealthy, the poor, the lost, and the simply exhausted gather to surrender to oblivion. Rank means nothing. Only your capacity to drift and your tolerance for increasingly surreal conversation. No one's in a hurry. No one's in pain, at least, not until the morning. You start to wonder how many good nights' sleep it takes before the line between rest and escape gets hopelessly blurred. Eventually, the world outside creeps back in. The first chimes of dawn, the bustle of milkmen and street vendors preparing for another day. You gather yourself, a little foggy, a little lighter, but mostly relieved to have survived without accidentally joining the furniture. The air is thick with the melancholy of unfulfilled dreams, and the knowledge that whatever relief you found is, by now, drifting off on someone else's exhale. You step into the morning light, the taste of smoke lingering on your tongue. Your wallet is lighter, your mind fuzzier, but for a moment you did escape the grind of Victorian life. Was it worth it? You'll let tomorrow's version of yourself decide. Tonight, sleep will come easily, though whether it brings dreams or just more fog is anyone's guess. Rest well, traveler. In the Victorian age, even your nightmares need a little help. It's all fun and games until you can't stop. As laudanum addiction rises, families start to notice things are not, in fact, improving. The phrase "just a little more" becomes a daily mantra. Spoiler: it's never just a little. At first, it's subtle. The family's laudanum bottle, which once lived out its days gathering dust beside the vinegar, begins to empty with suspicious speed. At breakfast, you notice father stirring his tea a little longer than usual, eyes a bit glassier, the toast a bit more burnt. Mother's headaches seem oddly persistent, and the children, previously miniature whirlwinds, have all achieved a state of zen that's less peaceful and more sedated standoff with the laws of physics. But you don't panic. After all, this is Victorian England. Everyone has a tincture for something, and there's no problem. A little more laudanum can't blur around the edges. Is your neighbor Mrs. Pemberton rambling about fairies in her garden? Laudanum. Is the dog hiding under the piano, haunted by a ghost only he can see? Laudanum. You soon realize the medicine cabinet has become less of a health solution and more of a poppy-powered personality swap. Days blend together in a fog of mild euphoria and missed appointments. You start losing track of which bottle is for coughs and which is for courage. Grandfather, who previously scoffed at modern medicine, now organizes his collection by bottle size and color with all the pride of a seasoned unophile. He claims he can identify different brands of laudanum by bouquet and aftertaste. No one argues with him, partly out of respect, but mostly because everyone is too drowsy to care. Even the family routine suffers. Chores go undone. Laundry piles up. The cat learns to open the pantry in a desperate search for unattended food, now that its humans are napping through mealtimes. Letters from friends and creditors stack up on the hall table, unanswered and unread. A sense of vague contentment descends, accompanied by an unmistakable undertone of mounting chaos. At some point, you realize the medicine cabinet is not just a storage solution, it's an opponent. You start each day with the best intentions. No laudanum today, not unless absolutely necessary. But by mid-morning, the smallest inconvenience, a squeaky floorboard, a drafty window, the existential dread of laundry, sends you back for just a drop. One drop becomes two. Two becomes four. Soon you're conducting complex negotiations with yourself, like a Victorian diplomat trying to avoid a scandal. If I skip lunch, surely I'm allowed an extra spoonful. The rest of the world doesn't help. The apothecary keeps the big bottles in stock. The doctor reassures you that withdrawal is merely a matter of willpower. The neighbors are all in the same boat, floating gently down the river denial. Public health officials mutter about dependence and loss of moral fiber, but their warnings drown in a sea of advertising jingles and testimonials from very satisfied, very sleepy customers. Inevitably, side effects rear their heads. Tempers fray for no reason, conversations get foggy, and the children's schoolwork turns into a surrealist masterpiece. At family gatherings, you trade stories of odd dreams and mysterious aches, quietly competing to see whose hallucinations are the most creative. No one wants to admit that the medicine meant to solve all problems has become the biggest problem of all. But still, the temptation remains. Laudanum is, after all, the Victorian answer to everything: pain, boredom, rain, existential dread, and the noise the upstairs neighbors make after midnight. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different. Fewer drops, more discipline, more actual coping. But deep down, You know that as long as the medicine cabinet is full, just a little more will always be within arm's reach. So you close the cabinet for tonight, resolve temporarily restored, and drift off into a laudanum-tinged sleep. The war between comfort and control continues, quiet, relentless, and fought entirely in your own parlor. Sleep well. You'll try again tomorrow. For every ailment of womanhood, laudanum is the first prescription. Midwives swear by it, mothers hide it in the cupboard, and doctors write it on every second page. Victorian gynecology, now with 100% more opiates. Step into a bustling Victorian household, and you'll find laudanum in every stage of a woman's life, tucked behind the flour canister, stashed in a knitting basket, or poured into an unlabeled teacup, just for nerves. It's the silent partner in every parlor conversation about the change, female complaints, and that time of the month. No matter the malady, the answer is always the same. Take a little laudanum, dear. You'll feel right as rain, or at least won't care that it's pouring. Let's start with mothers. Victorian motherhood is a marathon run in corsets and ankle boots, with obstacles that include impossible expectations and an ever-replenishing supply of children. Sleepless nights, teething, general feelings of despair. There's a bottle for that. Mothers become masters of the measured dose, though the exact amount is less a science and more a sliding scale of how many tantrums have erupted since breakfast. Then come the midwives, the unofficial medical authorities of every street and village. They move quietly through homes, their aprons loaded with herbs, scissors, and always a tiny bottle of laudanum. For labor pains, post-birth chills, the vapors, or even just a case of dramatic sighing, their advice is constant. Take a few drops and breathe. When all else fails, add a hot water bottle and a prayer. These women are walking encyclopedias of folk wisdom and questionable pharmacology, and if you ask them what's actually in the medicine, they'll just wink and say, "Whatever keeps the peace." Of course, the real showman is the Victorian doctor, equipped with a well-oiled mustache and a penchant for Latin phrases. He breezes through visits with a single-minded mission: write another prescription for laudanum. Menstrual cramps? Take laudanum. Fainting spells? More laudanum. Feeling a bit emotional? Why, have you tried laudanum? His medical notes might as well be a copy-paste job, punctuated only by the occasional bed rest and avoid excitement, which is a tall order when your life is an endless parade of laundry, relatives, and looming mortality. No diagnosis is too vague. Hysteria, the catch-all condition for anything inconvenient, is prescribed laudanum by the bottle. If you're a woman with opinions, you're likely to be considered at risk. Mood swings? Laudanum. Grief? Laudanum. That lingering sense that your husband is a lost cause? Double laudanum. And maybe a nap. And let's not forget pregnancy, the ultimate Victorian adventure. Women are handed laudanum as a catch-all for morning sickness, sleeplessness, contractions, and even after the baby arrives, for recovery, though no one says exactly what you're supposed to be recovering from, except possibly having survived Victorian childbirth. Breastfeeding? Here's a drop to steady the nerves. If the baby won't settle, everyone agrees. Just a smidge for baby and another for yourself. It's a miracle anyone in the family ever wakes up before noon. This routine of dosing and coping carries on behind closed doors, the world's quietest arms race. Mothers compare notes on which brand works fastest. Midwives brag about the strongest tinctures. Doctors keep refining their prescription signature to keep up with demand. Everyone's in on the secret, even if no one's willing to say out loud that maybe, just maybe, there's such a thing as too much. So you tuck the bottle back into its hiding spot, take a deep breath, or a shallow one if you're wearing tight stays, and carry on. In a society where women's pains are minimized and remedies are maximized, laudanum is the one solution everyone can agree on. Rest easy. If Victorian life has taught you anything, it's that a little laudanum might not fix everything, but it will certainly make you care less about what's broken. Childbirth? Have some laudanum. Afterbirth? More laudanum. Baby won't sleep. You know the drill. Victorian parenting hacks, sedation, sleep, and plausible deniability. Modern CPS would have a field day. Let's take you into the heart of the Victorian nursery, a place painted in soft pastels and padded with good intentions, anxiety, and just enough opium to stun a small pony. The rocking chair creaks as you pace, baby in arms, both of you equally sleep-deprived. The air is heavy with lavender, milk, and a sense that everyone is improvising. You're not just fighting the nightly battle for rest. You're fighting history, exhaustion, and a medical establishment whose entire maternity toolkit fits inside a bottle. Labor begins, and the world narrows to a dimly lit room filled with a symphony of nervous relatives and the ever-present midwife. Her solution for pain, laudanum, as always. It'll take the edge off, she says, pouring out a healthy measure with the confidence of someone who has never once checked a dosage chart. The pain subsides, or maybe you just stop noticing it. Either way, everyone agrees. You're doing beautifully, even as you drift somewhere between drowsy contentment and absolute oblivion. The baby arrives, and there's a moment of collective relief, quickly followed by a round of applause for the medicinal hero of the hour. The afterbirth, with its aches and lingering anxiety, is greeted not with careful observation or postnatal care, but with another dose. Rest, they say, and don't worry about a thing. If you feel anxious, sad, or just overwhelmed by the sheer volume of laundry, the solution is always within reach, disguised as compassion, but delivered by the teaspoon. Parenting, Victorian style, is an endless loop of problem and solution, both conveniently found in the same bottle. If your infant cries, often, loudly, for what feels like hours, the answer isn't swaddling, shushing, or a deep dive into baby psychology. No, it's a few drops slipped into the bottle or dabbed on a pacifier. Within minutes, silence reigns. The baby sleeps, you relax, and the household is saved from another round of communal wailing. It's only later you wonder if there's such a thing as a baby sleeping too soundly. Night feeds are less a bonding ritual and more a drowsy shuffle between the cradle and the medicine chest. Sleep, when it finally comes, is a foggy, floating thing. You're grateful, of course. You've been assured this is the height of modern parenting. Every other mother on the street does the same. At tea, you compare notes on which formula is the least bitter, which doctor is the most generous with samples, and how to keep grandmother from finding out what's really in those soothing syrups. Of course, there are moments of doubt. Maybe it's the way the baby wakes up groggy, eyes unfocused. Maybe it's the nagging feeling that your own exhaustion isn't normal, even for new parents. But the alternatives are unthinkable. Sleepless nights, endless crying, and the creeping suspicion that you might not be coping as well as you pretend. Laudanum, at least, is reliable. You tuck the bottle away, convincing yourself you'll only use it for emergencies, a promise that grows harder to keep as the weeks go by. If the doctor checks in, he's full of reassurance and refills. The midwife nods in agreement. No one questions the routine. The mantra is always rest, recover, medicate, repeat. Victorian maternity is equal parts love, fear, and chemistry experiment. Modern child protection services would need an army to keep up. As the city sleeps, so do you, drifting between dreams and half-wakefulness, comforted by the knowledge that at least tonight, everyone in the nursery is quiet. You tell yourself it's just for now, just until things get easier. But deep down, you know that the darkness outside is nothing compared to the fog within. Sleep well, new mother. History will be baffled, but at least, for tonight, you'll rest. The newspapers call them opium fiends, people whose lives have unraveled at the hands of the bottle. Crime rises, scandals bloom, and everyone pretends not to notice as long as the curtains are closed. Let's take you to a London street corner where the newsboys are shouting headlines. Shocking vice in Soho. High-born lady, caught in dreadful plight. But behind every dramatic article is a very Victorian blend of outrage and denial. Laudanum and its opium cousins are everywhere, slipping quietly across class lines. Your neighbor might be a regular, your banker too. The only thing more common than the bottles themselves is the collective agreement not to discuss what's in them. The so-called opium fiend comes in many shapes. The faded artist who once sold watercolors in Covent Garden, the clerk with trembling hands at the post office, the Baron's youngest son, once destined for Oxford, now mostly found dozing in alleys or waxing philosophical to lampposts. What unites them is not just their dependence, but society's refusal to acknowledge it, unless, of course, it leads to something truly scandalous. If you're caught, the descent is rapid and public. At first, you're merely unwell. Next comes a string of missed appointments, a rumor about debts, and finally a flurry of police reports. Theft, disorderly conduct, maybe even a midnight break-in at the apothecary. But in drawing rooms and private clubs, the topic is strictly off-limits. No one wants to admit that something so refined, so properly bottled, could unravel a life. The press, of course, loves a good scandal, especially when it involves the upper classes. The headline writes itself, "Society beauty falls to vice." Editors pile on adjectives, dreadful, shocking, unnatural. The story will hint at mysterious nighttime visitors, absences from church, and bills for quantities of laudanum that could medicate an entire orphanage. But the real crime for most Victorians is not the substance abuse itself. It's the spectacle. So long as the afflicted suffer quietly, all is forgiven. Cause a scene, and you'll be paraded through the papers for weeks. There are darker corners, too. Addiction spawns desperation, and desperation spawns new crime. The pawn shops fill with heirlooms, family rings, silver spoons, the occasional grandfather clock, all traded for the next bottle. Petty thefts rise, but so do elaborate cons. In one district, a rash of forged prescriptions keeps the local doctor in business, if only as a source of creative handwriting samples. Opium dens become hotspots for both petty criminals and amateur detectives, all lurking in the shadows and pretending not to know each other. At home, families fracture quietly. Arguments about missing money, absent spouses, or mysterious midnight excursions, and not with resolution, but with weary silence. Sometimes the afflicted are sent away to the country for their health, which is code for let's not discuss this in front of the servants. If things get truly dire, there's always the asylum, cold, clinical, and conveniently distant from polite society. Still, the cycle continues. Doctors, apothecaries, and enterprising salesmen keep the supply flowing, each with a comforting smile and a quick just what you need. And behind every closed curtain, there's a story that never quite makes it to the headlines. The mother in denial, the child who asks too many questions, the friend who quietly leaves town. As the city's gas lights flicker, the scandals fade into whispers. Another day ends. Another opium fiend vanishes into the fog. Tomorrow, the headlines will move on, and so will society, until the next bottle tips, the next secret leaks, and the dance begins again. Sleep easy, gentle listener. For every Victorian tragedy, there's 1,000 silent stories, and a city full of curtains drawn tightly against the night. It only takes a few thousand ruined lives for the doctors to start asking, "Is this fine?" Spoiler, it is not fine. But changing the mind of Victorian society is harder than quitting laudanum cold turkey. For decades, doctors wrote prescriptions with all the restraint of a child at a candy store. Laudanum for headaches, laudanum for the blues, laudanum for the unsettling feeling that the wallpaper is judging you. But as the years pass, the casualties pile up. Patients who fade away, families who grow quieter, and communities that become suspiciously well-rested. Eventually, even the most enthusiastic medical men have to squint over their spectacles and consider that maybe, just maybe, there's a problem. The first signs of doubt appear in the form of medical articles, written in the densest language possible, so as not to alarm anyone except those with an afternoon to spare and a good Latin dictionary. You picture Dr. Worthington of St. Swithin's Hospital, staring at a stack of patient records and noticing an odd trend. Everyone is either sleeping excessively, failing to show up for appointments, or experiencing visions of an unusual nature. At tea, his colleagues murmur in agreement, but nobody wants to be the first to say, "Let's cut back." There's a sense that the real disease is not addiction, but embarrassment. Public health warnings begin to trickle out. They're phrased delicately, as if the real risk is offending anyone's sensibilities. Moderation in all things, the pamphlets suggest, as if laudanum is a pudding rather than a national habit. Medical journals hedge every warning with the phrase for those so inclined. No one wants to be the alarmist at the party, especially if the punch bowl has a generous splash of the good stuff. Still, some doctors press on. They publish grim case studies. A lady of good breeding, overtaken by melancholy, and drowsiness, recovered only after prolonged abstention. The solution, they hint, is simple: stop taking laudanum. The problem, of course, is that no one wants to. The apothecaries quietly double their orders, and everyone agrees to read the warnings and ignore them with equal enthusiasm. You start to notice, though, that even society's most respected physicians are hedging their bets. The same doctor who once prescribed laudanum for a stubbed toe now whispers about the dangers of indiscriminate use. He introduces new treatments, mineral waters, fresh air, brisk walks in the country, none of which are as appealing as a warm, amber-tinted dose. Still, it's progress, Victorian style. Very slow, very polite, and thoroughly undermined by nostalgia. Magazines print cautionary tales, often disguised as fiction. The story of the promising young scholar who lost his way, the tragic bride who drifted into a gentle decline, the cheerful clerk who developed a reputation for napping at his desk and speaking to invisible rabbits. The message is clear, but the solution always vague. Consult your doctor before making lifestyle changes, the advice goes, as if anyone can get through a week of London weather without medicinal assistance. The final straw comes when someone of importance, say a viscount's daughter or the editor of a reputable periodical, falls victim to the laudanum habit. Suddenly, it's respectable to be concerned. Committees are formed, discussions held, and suggestions made for regulation. In Parliament, gentlemen with extravagant sideburns debate the perils of addiction while sneaking fortifying sips from their own hip flasks. And yet, for all the hand-wringing and gentle warnings, the bottles still line the shelves. Old habits, especially those involving opiates and a touch of denial, are hard to break. The medical community sighs, sharpens their quills, and resolves to try again next year. So, you, reclining with your evening tonic and a pamphlet on responsible use, wonder if anyone is actually listening. Maybe, just maybe, the first step toward recovery is admitting that sometimes history just really doesn't want to change. Sleep well. The doctors are worried now, but as always, Victorian progress prefers a gentle nap to a rude awakening. Authors, artists, and even politicians fall under laudanum's spell. Their diaries become a blend of creative brilliance and slowly descending chaos. Public breakdowns become as fashionable as mutton chops. Let's step into the salons and dinner parties of Victorian London, where gossip is the main course, and the only thing more intoxicating than the sherry is the steady drip of laudanum in the punch bowl. This is the age of the famous and famously troubled. Everyone wants to know what the poets are writing, what the painters are painting, and, perhaps most importantly, what the politicians are really thinking after 3 teaspoons of medicinal relief. The newspapers can hardly keep up. Baikan. Day, it's the scandal of a renowned novelist spotted weeping into his cravat at the theater. The next, it's an actress who is taken to reciting Hamlet's soliloquies from atop a cab in Trafalgar Square. Her lace parasol pointed at passing pigeons as if to challenge them to a duel. The public naturally is enthralled. There is something delightfully irresistible about watching one's idols descend from genius into glorious messy catastrophe. Behind closed doors, it's even more dramatic. Picture the study of a celebrated poet. The walls are lined with half-finished manuscripts, the air tinged with ink, and in the center of it all, the poet, hunched over his diary, pouring out his soul, and just a little bit of laudanum onto the page. The first entries are all insight and metaphor, but soon the handwriting gets wilder. The poem's less about love and loss, more about talking hedgehogs and the mathematical properties of soup. The phrase lost to history is often code for took up opiates and never quite put them down. Artists fare no better. Grand unveilings at the Royal Academy begin with much fanfare and end, sometimes, with the painter asleep beneath his own landscape, dreaming of sunflowers and giant chess pieces. If anyone asks, it's artistic temperament. If the press gets involved, it's an unfortunate decline brought on by the pressures of modern creativity. The fact that everyone is passing around the same bottle is mentioned only in the faintest of whispers. Politicians, too, are not immune. Debates in Parliament become less about policy and more about whose cough syrup packs the biggest punch. There's always a backbencher who is suddenly overcome with emotion, delivering a passionate speech about road tolls before collapsing gently onto a velvet bench. Campaign slogans become increasingly abstract. The phrase "in touch with the common man" takes on a whole new meaning when you're both attending the same pharmacist. When the inevitable public meltdown arrives, it's half disaster, half entertainment. Society loves a spectacle, provided it happens at a safe distance and can be discussed in detail over breakfast. Newspapers publish breathless accounts. noted statesman in a daze, mistakenly addresses Parliament as dearest marmosets. Anonymous sources supply the juiciest details. She was seen dancing with a broomstick at Lady Vicarage's soiree, scandalous. And always, there is a tragic moral at the end, a cautionary tale about the dangers of overindulgence, followed by an advertisement for a new and improved tonic with twice the laudanum and half the fuss. Of course, the true impact lingers after the press moves on. Some celebrities vanish from public life, retreating to country estates to recover, read, nap. Others double down, their wildness becoming part of their legend. A select few, brilliant and baffling to the last, are remembered not just for their works, but for the wild, laudanum-fueled roller coaster that was their public persona. So you tuck yourself into bed, marveling at the stories and scandals, and perhaps wondering how you'd fare in a world where public meltdown was just another part of the creative process. In Victorian England, fame is fleeting, but the stories, like mutton chops and questionable medicine, live on. Rest easy. If you dream in iambic pentameter or wake up halfway through a political speech, you're in good company. Eventually, the government notices things have gotten out of hand. Cue a delightful period of moral panic, half-hearted regulation, and the realization that nobody actually reads warning labels. It begins, as all great British crises do, with a committee. Parliament is suddenly gripped by the terrifying realization that their morning tonic may, in fact, be fueling a nation of sleepwalkers and hallucinating poets. Reports land on mahogany desks, surging addiction, a spike in unexplained drowsiness, and a notable increase in members of the clergy caught napping mid-sermon. Someone proposes an inquiry. Someone else suggests tea. Both are accepted. The newspapers, never ones to miss a melodramatic opportunity, fan the flames. A menace in every medicine cabinet, scream the headlines, conveniently ignoring their own back-page advertisements for Dr. Snapwell's restorative cordial, as recommended by 8 out of 10 parliamentarians. Public opinion divides neatly down the middle. Half the nation demands action, the other half can't be roused from their armchairs to care. So, regulations are drafted in the grandest possible fashion. Pages of earnest restrictions about labeling, limits, and the importance of consulting your doctor before swallowing anything brown and viscous. Pharmacies must now record sales. Laudanum bottles must come with actual warnings, though the fine print is so small you'd need a monocle, 2 candles, and the patience of a monk to read it. May cause drowsiness, dependency, or spontaneous poetry, the label might say, but who's checking? Most people are too busy measuring out their next dose to notice. Of course, nothing changes overnight. The apothecaries adapt with the creativity of seasoned magicians. Laudanum is suddenly rebranded as herbal tonic or soothing syrup. If you have a cough, a headache, or just a slightly inconvenient existential crisis, there's always a bottle tucked under the counter for loyal customers. Sales may drop on paper, but in parlors and kitchens, the little brown bottles continue their quiet reign. Meanwhile, resistance simmers. The upper crust rails against government interference. What next, they demand? Limits on sherry? Inspections of the biscuit tin? At town meetings, disgruntled mothers grumble about overreach, insisting that a teaspoon of laudanum has soothed generations of children, husbands, and occasionally the family cat. The true outrage, they say, is being treated like they can't be trusted to regulate themselves, a point usually made while hunting for the corkscrew. But for every new rule, there is a loophole. Prescription pads multiply like Victorian rabbits. Family doctors, always sympathetic, never inconvenienced by paperwork, continue to write orders for female troubles, nervous exhaustion, and difficult Mondays. Some simply wink and sell the good stuff on the sly, pocketing a little extra for their trouble. Meanwhile, rumors swirl of black market bottles smuggled in with shipments of sugar and tea. With every attempt at control, relapse looms in the background. Families vow to quit, to go cold turkey, to pour the laudanum down the drain only to find themselves crawling back after a sleepless night or an especially loud thunderstorm. Addiction is a stubborn house guest. It refuses to leave, even when threatened with pamphlets and parliamentary decrees. Eventually, the moral panic subsides. Society settles into a new routine. Bottles come with warnings. Regulations are obeyed in spirit, if not in practice. And everyone quietly agrees not to mention that the minister still snoozes through choir practice. The government declares victory. The public remains unconvinced. The laudanum bottle, ever patient, waits on the shelf, just in case. So you tuck yourself in, marvel at the ingenuity of bureaucracy, and whisper a promise to read the warning label tomorrow. But not tonight. Sleep comes first. And in the Victorian age, old habits die very, very hard. With laudanum under fire, new cures sweep the market, most of them just as dubious. Snake oil, cocaine tooth drops, and electric baths join the fray. Because if you can't sedate it, electrocute it. Welcome to the golden age of medical innovation, Victorian edition. Now, that society is just a teensy bit concerned about handing out opium by the pint. The market explodes with enterprising souls ready to fill the void. The result? A parade of new remedies that range from mildly ineffective to spectacularly unwise. Step right up and behold a dazzling world where every bottle, vial, and gadget promises to cure what ails you and, if nothing else, provide an excellent story for your next dinner party. Let's start with the classics. Snake oil, yes, actual oil from an actual snake, becomes the miracle potion du jour, allegedly able to soothe stiff joints, cleanse the blood, and restore the vigor of youth. Salesmen travel from town to town, hats at jaunty angles, boasting of miraculous recoveries by people who suspiciously never seem to be in the audience. If you're unconvinced, they'll drink it themselves, grimace heroically, and declare they've never felt better. It's a masterclass in marketing, if not medicine. Then there's the magic of cocaine tooth drops. Advertised as ideal for infants, these little bottles promise to numb teething pain. And, as a bonus, ensure your child is the life of the party for at least 6 straight hours. The family dentist is delighted. The family dog, less so. Parents begin to wonder why bedtime is now a competitive sport, with children dashing around the nursery at the speed of questionable progress. If liquids aren't your thing, the Victorians have a gadget for that. Enter the electric bath, a marvel of modern technology, where you, the ever-hopeful patient, sit in a tub of water while low-voltage current is sent zipping through your limbs. Advertisements insist this will cure paralysis, melancholy, and nervous afflictions. You will, at the very least, become intimately acquainted with the tingling sensation of impending regret. The local inventor, usually a man with a wild beard and a deep distrust of actual doctors, will cheerfully demonstrate the device on himself, his cat, or anyone foolish enough to stand too close. Other highlights include arsenic wafers for a healthy complexion, side effects, possibly glowing in the dark, tapeworm diet pills, the weight loss is real, the horror is too, and radium water for that unmistakable inner glow. If you start to sprout extra teeth or sleepwalk into the Thames, you're gently advised to reduce the dosage and consult a specialist, who will almost certainly prescribe something worse. The best part? Every cure comes with its own pamphlet, full of testimonials from satisfied customers. These are people with names like Mr. H. Wobblethwaite or Mrs. G. Enthusiasm, who declare that after just 1 week on Dr. Noodle's miracle liniment, they can now play the harpsichord, climb Mount Snowdon, and remember the names of all their cousins. No one questions these stories, after all, in the age of print. If it's written down, it must be true. Behind the spectacle, families try everything. If you can drink it, rub it, swallow it, sniff it, or stick a plug in it, someone has given it a go. You develop a new relationship with skepticism. The phrase natural remedy becomes both a promise and a warning. And so, with laudanum on the defensive and new cures multiplying like Victorian rabbits, you settle in for the night, surrounded by bottles, gadgets, powders, and hope. Sleep well. Tomorrow there will be another cure, just as miraculous, just as questionable, and just as irresistible to a world desperate for a shortcut to comfort. For those brave enough, or unlucky enough, to quit, withdrawal is its own special brand of horror. Picture shivering, sweating, and Victorian relatives offering helpful advice like, maybe try a brisk walk. You wake up one morning and resolve, no more laudanum. You are determined, principled, and possibly a little bit delirious already. The bottle is corked, the cabinet is locked, and your nerves are not on board with this plan at all. Within hours, your body launches a full-scale rebellion. Sweat beads on your brow. You shiver beneath 3 woolen blankets. Your teeth chatter loud enough to summon the neighbor's concern and the family cat's suspicion. Victorian families, ever helpful, spring into action. Mother brings you a cup of weak tea, as if tannins are any match for opioid withdrawal. Aunt Millicent suggests a mustard plaster for the chest, an onion under the bed, and a foot bath laced with vinegar. Your youngest cousin offers a pep talk about mental fortitude, delivered with the confidence of someone whose greatest hardship was losing at marbles last Thursday. Sleep is a memory, not a reality. You toss, you turn, and when you do drift off, your dreams are a wild parade. Giant bottles of laudanum dancing with judgmental apothecaries, Victorian doctors scrawling prescriptions in the clouds, and a persistent hallucination of your own reflection shaking its head in dismay. You wake up convinced you've been on an expedition to the North Pole, only to discover you haven't left your bed or changed your socks. The house responds in its own way. Meals become both battleground and performance art. Someone is always suggesting a restorative broth or a nice brisk walk around the garden, as if the cure for laudanum withdrawal is a little fresh air and the sight of Mrs. Peabody's suspiciously energetic terrier. You can barely stand, but propriety insists you dress for dinner and offer polite conversation, even if you're mostly talking to the gravy boat. The advice never stops. Rub this salve on your temples. Have you tried boiled turnip? A spoonful of cod liver oil sorted out my bunions. Maybe it'll work on your shakes. Meanwhile, the family physician arrives, takes your pulse, frowns, and delivers the least helpful verdict of all: time and willpower. He leaves behind a pamphlet on the dangers of overindulgence, a lecture about moderation, and, if you're lucky, a few words of actual sympathy. More often, he suggests a milder opiate just to ease the transition, and you start to suspect the circle will never truly end. Days pass, each one longer and stranger than the last. your bones ache, your thoughts spiral, and your family quietly debates sending you to the seaside for the restorative breezes. The household staff swaps stories of distant cousins who took the cure and either came back stronger or never returned at all. You cling to hope, stubbornness, and the faint memory of life before every problem had a liquid solution. Slowly, painfully slowly, the worst begins to pass. The sweating lessens, your hands steady, and you find yourself able to read a paragraph without immediately losing the plot. Food starts to taste like food again. Your dreams become less technicolor and more like gentle nonsense. One day, you even contemplate a brisk walk, not because someone told you to, but because the sunlight seems inviting. Your family breathes a collective sigh of relief. Life returns to its usual rhythm of minor discomforts and creative coping. You still crave laudanum, sometimes with a fierceness that surprises you. But you also remember how much you wanted to stop. And in the Victorian age, that's a victory in itself. So you pull up the covers, grateful for another night, another chance. Withdrawal is a beast, but you, shivering, sweating, and a little absurd, are somehow tougher. Sleep, if you can. You've earned it. Britain doesn't just love laudanum. It exports the whole opium problem to China and beyond. Colonialism, now with added addiction. Who says the British didn't know how to share? You're reclining in your Victorian sitting room, sipping your evening dose, blissfully unaware that the very comfort in your glass is fueling global chaos. Britain, in all its imperial enthusiasm, has discovered a new trick. Why solve your own problems when you can ship them overseas? The empire's motto might as well be, if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for the world, side effects and all. Let's travel back to the East India Company boardroom, a place that smells like tea, ambition, and a troubling lack of ethics. Here, the most powerful men in Britain hatch a plan. China, ancient and proud, has everything the British crave: porcelain, silk, and above all, tea. But there's a snag. The British treasury is running low on silver, and the Chinese don't want to swap their finest exports for knitted doilies or experimental marmalades. The solution, naturally, is opium. Lots of opium. If Britain can't afford to buy China's goods, perhaps it can make China crave something in return. Enter the great colonial plot twist: growing vast fields of opium poppies in India and shipping them to the Chinese coast by the ton. Suddenly, the tea trade flows in both directions. Tea leaves west, opium heads east, and the British accountants rub their hands with delight. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. The Chinese government, seeing its people slide into a national haze, tries to slam the door shut. Laws are passed, edicts proclaimed, and a few unlucky merchants are made into cautionary tales. The British response? Indignation, warships, and the kind of stubbornness only achievable after several generations of boarding school. The Opium Wars begin, a series of confrontations that are, at their core, about one country's right to get another country's population hooked on a mildly disastrous habit. Back home, the news is filtered through polite society. The wars are justified as matters of free trade and civilization, but everyone knows that what's really being exported is addiction, packaged up in casks and crates, disguised with the Union Jack. The Victorians perfect the art of ignoring awkward truths. After all, it's easier to admire your new china set when you don't think too hard about how it arrived. You can't help but notice the ironies. While the British Parliament debates how much laudanum is too much for children, Their ships are unloading literal tons of opium on foreign shores. Mothers on both sides of the globe are quietly slipping doses to restless babies, and fathers are wondering why nobody ever seems to finish a sentence anymore. What started as a local cure-all is now an international problem, one with borders, tariffs, and the occasional gunboat. Even as the empire's opium strategy spreads, resistance grows. Reformers write pamphlets, missionaries decry the moral cost, and Chinese officials attempt crackdowns that range from earnest to spectacularly doomed. The British government eventually wrings its hands, offers symbolic reforms, and finds new markets for whatever vice isn't currently under investigation. At night, you lie in your bed, the city humming quietly, the empire's reach as long as the shadows on your ceiling. Maybe you dream of faraway places, of tea plantations and poppy fields, of distant wars and quiet deals struck in smoky rooms. Or maybe you simply drift into another laudanum-tinged sleep, grateful that history, with all its inconvenient questions, won't demand answers until morning. So rest easy, armchair imperialist. If nothing else, the empire's greatest export is its ability to muddle through, one bottle at a time, spreading its problems across the world and calling it progress. By the early 1900s, laudanum falls out of favor, replaced by less exciting things like aspirin and common sense. But for a while, it was the answer to everything. And sometimes, in rare cases, it still is. Let's set the scene. The world is changing. The streets are filling with the rattle of motor cars. Corsets are loosening, just a smidge. And even the most stubborn physicians are starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the answer to every problem isn't lurking in the bottom of an opium bottle. There's a new confidence in science, new machines, new medicines, and a new set of rules about what counts as acceptable risk. You, the thoroughly modern Victorian, watch as laudanum's reign comes to an end, not with a bang, but with a slow, resigned sigh. It isn't one dramatic moment, it's 1,000 little ones. A new doctor arrives in town, younger and suspiciously optimistic, with a leather case full of pills and a tendency to recommend hydration and rest. Newspapers start running articles about the dangers of addiction, written by people who have recently discovered the word addiction. The apothecary's back room gets a quiet makeover. Gone are the towering jars of syrupy brown liquid, replaced by tidy rows of powders and tablets that promise relief without the need for a secret handshake. Aspirin is the new darling. It's clean, it's modern, and best of all, it doesn't come with spontaneous poetry or 3-day naps. Mothers can now soothe headaches with a tablet instead of a teaspoon. Doctors encourage a stiff upper lip, fresh air, and the occasional tonic, which, in a surprising twist, now contains more lemon than laudanum. Children are told to drink orange juice, not opiates, and if you ask your grandmother about the old days, she'll sigh and say, "We managed," before changing the subject. But change is never quite that tidy. There are those who cling to the old ways. A few bottles remain, hidden away in cupboards, and old medicine chests, kept for real emergencies, which, in the right household, can range from migraines to garden variety existential dread. There's always an uncle who swears by the stuff, insisting that modern medicine is all well and good, but nothing works quite like a drop of the real thing. Occasionally, an elderly neighbor claims she still keeps laudanum just in case the cat gets colic. The law eventually catches up. Laudanum is restricted, prescriptions are scrutinized, and patent medicines become museum curiosities, filed under "what were they thinking?" But the memory lingers. Even as the world embraces the promises of science, there's a quiet nostalgia for the era when the answer to every question was simply "laudanum, dear." The medical profession, finally free from the tyranny of poppy syrup, rediscovers the joys of diagnosis and treatment. Doctors begin to specialize. Nurses wield thermometers with newfound authority. Pharmacies start to look suspiciously like candy shops, and the phrase "as needed" is replaced by "take as directed." Life gets a little less dreamy, a little less blurry around the edges, and, depending on your point of view, a little less fun. And yet, the legend endures. Occasionally, a story will surface: a doctor in a remote corner, an antique bottle found at the back of a cupboard, a patient who insists that nothing else quite touches the pain. In rare cases, under strict supervision, laudanum is still prescribed, its dangers weighed against the stubborn miseries of the human body. As you settle into bed, grateful for ibuprofen and central heating, you can't help but marvel at the odd journey from cure-all to cautionary tale. The world is wiser now, or so we hope, but history remains full of old bottles and old habits, waiting to be rediscovered by the next generation of seekers, skeptics, and sleepwalkers. Rest easy. The age of laudanum may be over, but the need for comfort and a little mystery never truly disappears. Victorian nostalgia means laudanum never truly leaves. From period dramas to pop songs, the legendary cure-all keeps popping up. Nothing says mood like a wistful reference to opium. It's a curious thing, the way history clings to its vices with a mixture of embarrassment and affection. Modern life is full of comforts your Victorian ancestors could only dream of: central heating, antibiotics, and a complete lack of cobblestone puddles. But every so often, culture slips back into its corset, polishes its brass, and tips its hat to the golden days of laudanum. You see it everywhere, if you know where to look. Pop open a Victorian novel or binge watch the latest moody costume drama, and the laudanum bottle makes its cameo, perched on a bedside table, offered by a brooding governess, clutched by a tormented poet with hair in permanent disarray. It's always dark amber, always mysterious, and always a little glamorous, because nothing says serious acting like sipping opiates and gazing out a key, rain-streaked window. The stories are irresistible. Writers love a good tragic arc, and what better way to signal inner torment than with a bottle labeled "For what ails ye." The suffering artist, the grieving widow, the scandal-plagued lord all find solace, or at least distraction, in the swirling depths of Victorian medicine. And if their story ends in chaos, well, that's just historical accuracy with a dramatic flourish. Even in music, the ghost of laudanum lingers. Bands name-drop opium dreams and Victorian haze, setting the mood for late-night introspection, or an excuse to wear velvet indoors. Album covers feature faded apothecary labels and gothic fonts. If you're a pop star hoping to seem deep, melancholy, or just really into old bottles, a quick allusion to laudanum guarantees at least 3 think pieces and a minor trend in floral wallpaper. The fashion world is equally enthralled. Designers parade out collections inspired by the romantic decline of the 19th century. Think silk gowns, oversized sleeves, and a color palette best described as opiate chic. Photo shoots pose models in antique beds, half lit by a gas lamp glow, with medicine bottles artfully arranged among lace and pearls. Everyone looks beautifully pained, slightly lost, and if you squint, about 2 teaspoons from a nap. Of course, not all the nods to laudanum are so serious. Satirical sketches and late-night comedy shows can't resist poking fun at the Victorian tendency to treat every inconvenience with a healthy dose of narcotics. Modern memes ask, "Bad day? Bring back laudanum." Social media channels run with the earmark of Victorian remedies, pairing black and white portraits with captions like, "When coffee just isn't enough." The line between respect and mockery is thin, but somehow laudanum's legend survives it all. There's even a strange comfort in how the past's mistakes become the present's cautionary tales. Documentaries unspool the history of addiction with grave voices, while the audience at home clutches mugs of herbal tea and murmurs, "Can you imagine?" The answer is, of course, yes, because the allure of a simple solution never really goes out of style. In the end, laudanum's real staying power is its mood. It's melancholy with a little shimmer, drama with a dash of denial. It's the sense that, once upon a time, your ancestors handled heartbreak, headaches, and existential dread with a wink and a shot glass. The world may be safer, but nostalgia is never entirely rational. There's a quiet thrill in knowing that, even as you tuck yourself in with a dull headache and a Netflix queue, somewhere out there, a fictional duchess is solving all her problems with a single, elegant sip. So, sleep well, with or without the antique props. History's greatest vices have a habit of sticking around, if not in your medicine cabinet, then at least in your imagination. And tonight, as you drift off, maybe you'll dream of velvet gowns, gothic candlelight, and a world where even your troubles come with an artful label. So, would you have survived Victorian London with only a bottle of laudanum, some hard bread, and questionable life choices? The answer is almost certainly no, but let's imagine how your week would go. Spoiler, not well, but at least you'd sleep. Let's set the scene. You wake up in a narrow, creaky bed in 1846, greeted by a chorus of distant coughing, the soft rattle of carriage wheels, and a damp chill that makes you question every decision that led you here. Your room is decorated with a single candle, an odd portrait of someone else's ancestors, and, of course, a half-full bottle of laudanum sitting beside the world's hardest loaf of bread. You're armed and ready for whatever the city can throw at you, which, as it turns out, is quite a lot. Day 1. Breakfast is a choice between cold porridge and cold toast. You choose the bread, immediately regret it, and make a mental note to schedule a dental appointment for 173 years in the future. As you step outside, you're hit with the combined aroma of horse, coal smoke, and ambition. The city bustles around you. A bootblack offers to shine your shoes, which are mostly mud. The baker's boy yells, "Fresh bread," with wild optimism. You respond with a cough, which wins you a knowing nod and unhelpfully advice to try a little laudanum. By lunchtime, your modern sensibilities are fraying. You stub your toe on an uneven cobblestone. You take laudanum. A stray dog barks at you. You take laudanum. You hear that Queen Victoria might be riding past at some point, and you're not emotionally prepared for the pressure. More laudanum. By dinner, your problems haven't gone away, but your concern for them has drifted gently out the window and into the Thames. Day 2 is even more exciting. You're expected to work, though no one has explained what your job actually is. You guess and decide to try your hand at being a chimney sweep, but after 1 hour and 3 blisters, you retreat to a tea shop. Someone complains about the rain, so you offer them your laudanum bottle. Now you have a new friend, or possibly a new enemy. It's hard to tell, as the world grows increasingly floaty and conversations seem to happen in slow motion. By midweek, you've settled into a rhythm. Whenever you're cold, hungry, or emotionally bruised by Victorian table manners, you reach for your bottle. You begin to understand why everyone in the city is either coughing, napping, or both. Food tastes like cardboard, water tastes like regret, and your dreams involve an elaborate puppet show starring your own laundry. You try to keep track of your spending, but discover that math is difficult when every number is followed by a gentle sense of euphoria. Friday rolls around and you notice you're feeling odd. You're not sure if you're awake or dreaming. You can't remember if you've eaten. Your neighbor swears you spent the night reciting poetry to a gas lamp, but you have no memory of it, and honestly, that tracks. Saturday, you're informed that you've been invited to a dinner party. You bring the laudanum as a hostess gift. It's the hit of the evening. Everyone goes home early, and for once, blissfully, no one argues about politics. By the end of the week, you've discovered that Victorian life is a spectacular mess of discomfort, confusion, and questionable self-medication. Your bread is still hard, your laundry still unwashed, but your bottle is empty, and miraculously, so are your worries. Would you survive another week? Highly unlikely. Would you remember any of it? Also unlikely. So, as you drift off to sleep on your impossibly lumpy mattress, you're grateful for modern medicine, soft pillows, and a life free from poppy tinctures. Congratulations, you made it, sort of. Please, don't try this at home, but if you do, may your dreams be gentle, your bread be soft, and your bottle be strictly decorative. The morning after a hearty dose of laudanum is something no etiquette manual prepares you for. Your head is pounding, your mouth is dry enough to start a small fire, and you're half convinced your eyebrows have switched places. Victorian hangover cures, more laudanum, a raw egg, and possibly a lecture from your local vicar about moral fortitude. Nothing like waking up feeling worse than when you started. Let's set the scene. The first rays of sunlight crawl through the sooty curtains, landing directly on your face, which currently feels like it was left overnight in a coal scuttle. You blink, squint, and immediately regret regaining consciousness. Your tongue is glued to the roof of your mouth. You wonder if you accidentally swallowed your boot, or if this is just what happens when your blood is 40% poppy syrup and 60% remorse. Your first attempt at standing is a mistake. Gravity and regret conspire to send you back to the pillow, where you have a moment to review your choices. Did you really challenge the landlord to an arm wrestling contest last night? Did you serenade the neighbor's cat with a tearful rendition of God Save the Queen? You may never know. The only witness, a half-empty laudanum bottle, offers no answers, just a lingering sense of betrayal. Downstairs, the household is bustling. Someone is frying bacon, someone else is boiling water, and everyone is pointedly not asking about the mysterious trail of shoe polish leading from the hallway to the pantry. You shuffle into the kitchen, eyes shielded against the horror of daylight, and are promptly offered the full menu of Victorian hangover cures. First up, more laudanum, because as any seasoned sufferer knows, nothing takes the edge off like a second helping of the thing that caused the problem. It's the original hair of the dog, except the dog, in this case, is more of a rabid wolf. Next is the raw egg, swallowed in one go, and followed by a prayer that salmonella was not invented yet. Then, for good measure, there's the bracing morning tonic, which smells suspiciously like gin and despair. If you're lucky, the family vicar might drop by with stern advice about moral rectitude, the dangers of temptation, and the evils of indulgence. He is, of course, oblivious to the fact that his own sermons occasionally drive half the parish to the apothecary for soothing syrup. He offers you a pamphlet on the virtue of moderation, which you use as a coaster for your water glass, a practical application if ever there was one. Your friends, hearing of your condition, arrive to lend moral support and questionable advice. A brisk walk will do you good, they cry, conveniently forgetting that the last time you tried a brisk walk, you ended up napping in a neighbor's rose bush. Others recommend the cold plunge, a bucket of water over the head, and an existential crisis to follow. Someone brings you a strange herbal brew that tastes like bitter regret and freshly mowed lawn clippings. Supposedly, it restores the humors. It mostly restores your desire to never leave your bed again. If all else fails, you can try the time-honored Victorian cure, waiting it out. Wrap yourself in blankets, sip weak tea, and stare at the wall until reality begins to make sense again. The cat, ever sympathetic, curls up beside you and purrs in solidarity. You silently vow to never touch laudanum again, at least until the next social obligation, unexpected heartbreak, or rogue turnip-based dinner party. By midday, you're more or less vertical, though you're not sure if you're truly awake or just haunting your own house. You promise to embrace moderation, vegetables, and moral fortitude, at least until next week. After all, in Victorian London, the cycle of overindulgence and repentance is as reliable as the morning fog. So sleep off your regrets, gentle sufferer. Tomorrow is another day, and in the Victorian era, another cure is always just a teaspoon away. Picture it, a mustachioed man on a wobbly crate, waving a bottle and promising eternal vigor, perfect skin, and the ability to play the piano by ear. Traveling salesmen were the rock stars of rural Victorian Britain, hawking laudanum alongside miracle balms and painless dental pliers. If you ever doubted the power of show business, watch a crowd clap for a man selling opium as family entertainment. The village green comes alive when the salesman rolls into town. His wagon is painted in gaudy colors, festooned with banners announcing Professor Miracle's Elixir of Life and Madame Marvelous's Instant Beauty Serum for lady or horse. Children chase after the wheels. Adults try to look uninterested but edge closer, and the local constable pretends to inspect the horse's hooves while really angling for a free sample. The salesman hops onto his crate and launches into his routine. He's part magician, part preacher, part circus ringmaster, one eyebrow arched higher than the village, steeple, his voice booming across the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, step right up. Are you troubled by aches, pains, misfortune, or the inability to remember the third verse of Greensleeves? One dose, just one, and all your woes will melt away faster than Aunt Mildred's teeth in a thunderstorm. He rattles off a list of supposed medical triumphs. Mrs. Hargreaves, cured of chronic gloom. Farmer Bill, now able to dance a jig without squeaking. Every ailment has a testimonial, some more credible than others. If you listen closely, the voice in the crowd shouting, "It's true," is usually the salesman's nephew in disguise. No one minds. The fun is in the performance. The real star is always the bottle. The glass glows a mysterious amber, catching the sunlight just so. The label is ornate, guaranteed to restore youth, beauty, and financial responsibility. Ingredients? A closely guarded secret, but if you squint, you can spot laudanum, camphor, and just enough alcohol to encourage spontaneous investment. The crowd leans in, hypnotized. Sales begin in a flurry. People part with pennies, shillings, even precious eggs, desperate for relief, or at least a decent story for the pub. "Take a sip," the salesman shouts, selecting a volunteer. The brave soul grimaces, coughs, and then, miraculously, declares they feel absolutely splendid. Applause breaks out, the local doctor sighs, and the apothecary takes notes for next week's marketing strategy. Of course, there are add-ons. Miracle ointments that promise to make your hair glossier and your secrets less noticeable. Mechanical tooth pullers that remove only the pain, never the teeth, though the reverse is usually true. A liniment for horses and husbands, since the difference is sometimes academic. The salesman winks, the crowd laughs, and suddenly everyone is 2 shillings poorer and 1 dose braver. No one seems bothered that half the products are glorified sugar water and the other half could knock out an elephant. There's a communal sense that, at the very least, you've bought a little hope and a rollicking afternoon's entertainment. For a brief, golden hour, the aches and cares of rural life fade beneath the spectacle, the sales pitch, and the lingering taste of something probably illegal in 7 countries. When the show ends, the salesman packs his crates and tips his hat, promising to return soon with an even more astonishing cure, perhaps for baldness, perhaps for the embarrassment of being fooled twice. The villagers return home, bottles in hand, ready to try their luck. In the quiet after the crowd disperses, you realize, sometimes the real miracle isn't in the medicine, but in the audacity of believing it just might work. So, sleep tight. If you dream of mustachioed men and glowing bottles, just remember, the show will roll into town again, and everyone loves a little magic, even if it comes with a hangover and a suspicious aftertaste. Every Victorian home needed a fainting room, because when your medicine cabinet is full of narcotics, spontaneous collapse is just part of the decor. Ladies overcome with emotion, or, let's be honest, laudanum, could retreat to plush velvet sofas and contemplate their life choices. The line between fashionable frailty and accidental overdose was as thin as a lace glove. Let's wander through a typical Victorian house, past the gloomy portrait gallery, through the parlor bristling with antimacassars, and into the most mysterious chamber of all, the fainting room. Here, the lighting is soft, the upholstery even softer, and the atmosphere heavy with the combined sense of rosewater and uncertainty. The sofa is generously padded, ideal for crumpling onto in a fit of nerves, joy, or after that second medicinal tipple with afternoon tea. Why such a room, you ask? Because Victorian sensibilities demanded both drama and discretion. Socializing was a full-contact sport. You might survive hours of rigid posture, eyebrow-raising gossip, and the lingering trauma of being served undercooked turnips at a dinner party. In this world, showing robust health was considered rather common. What you wanted was a delicate, poetic pallor, as though you'd just spent a night reading tragic poetry by candlelight and another 2 hours arguing about the merits of watercress. If, during the day's ordeals, you felt the creeping threat of the vapors, an all-purpose diagnosis for anything from mild stress to existential panic, the solution was immediate retreat. The fainting room offered refuge for the trembling, the emotional, and anyone hoping to avoid helping with the dishes. Just a whiff of laudanum, and you could glide away on a cloud of societal expectations and plausible deniability. Of course, not every collapse was strictly necessary. Sometimes it was just strategy. A tiresome caller? Time for a fainting spell. Unwanted marriage proposal? Suddenly, your delicate constitution demands solitude and a cool compress. You recline on the chaise longue, hand to brow, and let the world wait while you recover from the shocking realization that your new hat is slightly out of fashion. But sometimes it wasn't just an act. The medicine chest was bursting with potions, tinctures, and tonics, most generously laced with laudanum or something equally soporific. A restorative dose for a headache, a little more for female complaints, and by mid-afternoon, you might be 2 spoons away from composing a love letter to the fireplace tongs. It's a wonder anyone remembered to show up for dinner. Doctors, naturally, encouraged the trend. After all, the fainting room was an elegant solution to the messiness of actual symptoms. Too tired to attend the ball? Not a problem. Just take to the sofa and declare yourself overcome. The family physician would stop by, peer at you with grave concern, and prescribe, what else? More rest, more laudanum, and a strict regimen of sighing and sipping. The men weren't entirely immune, either. If a gentleman was seen retreating to the library with a grimace, it was understood he was merely contemplating weighty matters, not in need of medical intervention. But if he lingered too long, you could be sure someone would send in a restorative tray, complete with a cordial for the nerves. By evening, the fainting room was empty, ready for another day of spontaneous collapse and carefully curated fragility. The sofa would be fluffed, the curtains drawn, and the bottle discreetly topped off, just in case someone needed to contemplate the cruel world with their eyes closed. So, as you settle into your own bed, far from the perils of Victorian emotional hygiene, spare a thought for the delicate souls of the past. If you ever feel the urge to faint, remember, sometimes all you need is a quiet room, a soft sofa, and the freedom to take a break from the chaos, preferably without the laudanum. Sleep well, and may your nerves be forever steady. How did Victorians decide when to take laudanum? With a complete absence of Google, WebMD, or even reliable pamphlets, every strange symptom was either a mild inconvenience or a sign of imminent doom. Sore throat? Laudanum. Unusual dreams about talking hedgehogs? Maybe take 2. The result? Everyone's an amateur doctor, and every amateur doctor is slightly intoxicated. Imagine living in a world where consulting an expert means sending a handwritten letter to your cousin Agnes, who once read half a book on home remedies and claims to know which phase of the moon causes warts. There are no online forums, no handy symptom checkers, not even a helpful flowchart on the wall of the apothecary. Every ache, pain, or mysterious rash is a fresh adventure, equal parts guessing game, performance art, and mass hysteria. The stakes are high and the diagnostics are, well, creative. If you wake with a sore neck, is it the result of yesterday's draft? Or have you fallen victim to the dreaded stiffness of the humors? Got a cough? Time to flip through your uncle's dog-eared manual of domestic medicine, where every diagnosis is followed by the same prescription: rest, broth, and laudanum, preferably all at once. If your stomach rumbles ominously, it could be hunger, indigestion, or an omen that you're about to lose your inheritance to a mysterious cousin from Cornwall. Without the aid of modern science, every symptom is fair game for the imagination. Pale skin? Must be the vapors. Heart racing? Blame a surfeit of excitement, or perhaps too much lemon in your pudding. Night sweats, fleeting melancholy, or a sudden urge to compose poetry. The sure sign of overexertion, poor air, or, if all else fails, bad wallpaper. The recommended solution: a long nap and a carefully measured dose of whatever's at the front of the medicine cabinet. Everyone fancies themselves a bit of a doctor. Your neighbor prescribes garlic poultices for headaches. The local baker swears by burnt toast for fever. And your Aunt Edwina recommends soaking your feet in gin while reciting Psalm 23. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it leads to strange conversations with passing constables. Either way, there's always laudanum as the last resort. Even the professionals are making it up as they go. Doctors, for all their impressive facial hair and Latin vocabulary, are not immune to the mystery. They squint at your tongue, tap your knees, and declare you in need of a tonic. If they're feeling ambitious, they'll suggest leeches, but mostly they reach for the opium bottle and hope for the best. The truly daring might suggest a brisk walk, but only if the weather cooperates and the patient's constitution is deemed up to the challenge. For the truly perplexing cases, the household may convene a council of war. Everyone sits around the dining table, diagnosing your sneezes and tics with the solemnity of a parliamentary debate. The final decision, laudanum, just in case. If the symptoms vanish, you're a medical miracle. If they linger, there's always another home remedy, another bottle, and another elaborate excuse for missing church on Sunday. Over time, you learn to embrace the uncertainty. Life is one long experiment in self-care, improvisation, and ignoring that nagging feeling you should maybe just drink more water. The only constant is the comfort of knowing that, whatever the ailment, there's a cure. If not in the bottle, then in the endless supply of neighborly advice. So as you tuck yourself in for the night, slightly woozy from your treatment, you remind yourself that sometimes not knowing is half the fun. In a world before instant answers, a little laudanum and a lot of optimism go a long way. Sleep well, budding Victorian diagnostician. Tomorrow brings new mysteries, and almost certainly another dose. It wasn't just humans who benefited from laudanum. Victorian pets, dogs, cats, the occasional fretful parrot were dosed for everything from nervous barking to melancholy bird. If your dog looked tired, a drop of laudanum was just the thing. Sure, there's no veterinary training here, but in an era when everyone's medicating everything, what could possibly go wrong? Step inside the average Victorian parlor, and it's a zoo, sometimes literally. Every household worth its salt boasts a menagerie of animals, lap dogs with pedigrees longer than your family tree, tabby cats claiming the best chair, and birds who seem to thrive on drama. The pets are more than companions. They're family, status symbols, and, on occasion, innocent victims of the latest medical fads. Your dog, Buster, starts the morning with a dramatic sigh and a sideways glance at the laudanum bottle on the mantel. He's been watching the humans dose themselves for years and has picked up on the routine. Stub your paw, look pitiful, and wait for someone to administer just a little drop. The family cat, Minerva, is not to be outdone. Her coughs are suspiciously well-timed, and she has mastered the art of looking ever so slightly wan at the sound of the apothecary's carriage. The birds, naturally, are the most dramatic of all. Polly the parrot squawks loudly whenever the word melancholy is mentioned, which is often, this is a Victorian household after all. The phrase melancholy bird is met with concern, deep sighs, and inevitably a spoonful of something brown and syrupy administered through a delicate glass pipette. No one questions this. It's simply what one does. With no formal veterinary training, every pet ailment becomes an opportunity for creative diagnosis. Dog a bit listless? Perhaps he's suffering from canine ennui. Cat not eating her supper? Surely it's tabby torpor. Parrot refusing to recite Byron? a classic case of avian apathy. The solution, always, is a medicinal drop, sometimes laudanum, sometimes whatever else is at hand, including sherry, cough syrup, or an experimental fish oil tonic recommended by a neighbor with a suspiciously short-lived budgie. Of course, the results are mixed. Some pets simply nap more, as if that were possible, while others become uncharacteristically friendly or serenely indifferent to the chaos of the drawing room. Buster, after a particularly generous dose, spends an entire afternoon staring out the window as if contemplating the meaning of life, the universe, and the appeal of chasing carriages. Minerva, after her treatment, seems to take up yoga, holding elaborate stretches on the hearth rug with an expression of feline enlightenment. Sometimes things don't go as planned. The dog might sleep through a thunderstorm and dinner. The cat might forget to torment the goldfish for an unprecedented 24 hours. The parrot might begin quoting sermons instead of poetry, alarming both the housekeeper and the visiting vicar. The humans, of course, are unperturbed. If anything, they congratulate themselves on their modern approach to animal care. See? No more barking at the mailman. Isn't science wonderful? Yet, beneath the Victorian confidence, a faint note of uncertainty lingers. What are the long-term effects of a shared medicine cabinet? Is Buster's sudden fascination with existential literature a cause for concern? Should Minerva's newfound serenity be studied or simply admired? The answers remain elusive, tucked away in the same dusty corners as last year's prescription notes and the family's half-finished volume of home remedies for all creatures, great and small. By bedtime, the household is tranquil. Pets and people alike drift into a shared laudanum haze, soothed by the conviction that, for tonight, all is well. Tomorrow's problems, whether canine, feline, or avian, can be solved with another drop and a little more hope. So sleep easy, knowing your Victorian counterparts believed wholeheartedly in one-size-fits-all medicine. May your dreams be free of melancholy birds and over-medicated dogs, and may your own pets, if they're listening, forgive you for the sins of history. As the haze of Victorian London fades and the clink of medicine bottles quiets, it's time to settle back and let your thoughts drift, safely, and laudanum-free, I hope. Tonight, you've journeyed through a world where hope came in a bottle, doctors prescribed sleep by the teaspoon, and entire families navigated daily life somewhere between mild euphoria and mild disaster. Maybe you laughed, maybe you cringed, maybe you realized your own medicine cabinet could use a warning label or two. But one thing's for sure. Surviving the age of laudanum took a particular kind of stubbornness, a pinch of denial, and a willingness to trust the advice of a man with a questionable mustache and a bottle that smelled suspiciously like regret. So as you tuck yourself into your clean bed, surrounded by the blissful absence of coal soot and unsolicited tinctures, give a little thanks for the resilience of those who came before us, people who endured life's aches, heartbreaks, and existential dread with little more than hope and an absolutely unhinged sense of medical optimism, because history is full of ordinary people muddling through impossible circumstances, sometimes heroically, sometimes hilariously, and almost always with the help of something that probably shouldn't be in the medicine cabinet. Take a deep breath and let it all go. No more miracle cures tonight. No midnight trips to the apothecary. No frantic searches for a fainting couch. Just the quiet comfort of the present, a soft pillow, and the gentle certainty that your worst day doesn't require opium and brandy to survive it. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that people are resourceful, ridiculous, and remarkably hard to keep down. Sleep well, be grateful for modern medicine, and remember, sometimes the best remedy is just a good story and a night of peaceful, undisturbed sleep. Good night.